The CEO Cafe is brought to you by the Bank of Nashville. This is another in a series of the leaders that we bring to the people of Nashville as our gift. Today, LouisUpkins is with us, who is CEO of Design House. Louis is going to speak to us about balance and families for the CEO, a challenge for not only the CEOs in Nashville, but CEOs everywhere.
Y'all have a real treat in store for you. LouisUpkins, who I'd never had the pleasure to hear until this morning, but had heard good things about him. We'll talk about the challenge that we all have of finding balance in our life. Everybody in this room is very accomplished and here for a reason, and you have a lot of demands in your time, both community, family, business, and that's a hard thing to do. Jim Fuller is going to introduce Louis, excuse me, and Jim is really the engine behind the CEO Cafe. It was a great idea. There was no way to get all this pulled together. We didn't have the time or the staff to do this. Jim saw the opportunity to put IDS and Channel 10 and our bank and the speakers together. So I'd like to turn it over to Jim Fuller.
LouisUpkins will be our speaker, and the yellow sheet gives a promo of him, so you don't have to read very far to come across names like the Olympic Games, Oprah, Starbucks, Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston. I told him this morning, I don't know how many celebrities you have to work with before you become a celebrity, but I'd get his autograph before he got out of here if I were you. But we've heard him speak once, and it's a pretty compelling focus that he's got, and we'll get back to that in just a minute. As far as this event is concerned, it was born out of lots of folks who work with CEOs, beginning with the Small Business Resource Center and Paula Roberts of the Bank of Nashville, Channel 10, those of us who do consulting with CEOs. And the common denominator was that it felt like you can get pretty isolated as a CEO and somehow get a little stale if you don't have professional growth, and it's hard to get professional growth as busy as you are being a CEO. So to form something like this, that would be a time to network with others who are just like you, and to have an enrichment period, and to put it on TV so that others can have throughout the community access to it. That all seemed to make sense. Today we're adding an element, and this whole thing is a work in progress, so we're looking to you to tell us if you like this, don't like it, think it's a good idea, bad idea, or whatever. But the element is nonprofit, community service group. And really, this is Landon Gibbs over here. Landon, raise your hand. He's working with Clayton McWhorter. This flowed out of Clayton's speech, because the last point in Clayton McWhorter's presentation in this room was every CEO ought to give back. And when we presented the idea of giving back as a part of the CEO Cafe, the Bank of Nashville was extremely responsive. They're on 23 boards throughout the community. They're very involved in the community, so that made sense. Louis is a board member of a nonprofit that you're going to be impressed with. It's the first in Nashville. It's only been here for a year, this year. This year's the first year. But you're going to be impressed. So Louis is going to make a presentation. Then we're going to end that part and have a Q&A and an open discussion so you can participate. And then the reason this is a cafe is so this can be a conversation. And that's what it was designed to be. So if you've got thoughts on Louis's thoughts, you can speak up and tell us what your thoughts are. And then we're going to reserve a few minutes and focus on this service that has come to Nashville, and throw a spotlight on it, not just in this room, but to the television audience. And you can tell us what you think about that too. We're very proud to present LouisUpkins.
Well, good afternoon. Don't be bashful. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about something that I have a burning passion, and that is balance. As a CEO, and all of you in this room are CEOs, we are focused every day with bottom lines and making money, strategic planning, forecasting the future, deleting our competitors, all the above. But the thing that I have seen over and over and over my short 40-plus years, is I see people get all the way to the end of that road with the wrong people. And what I mean by that is these are successful business leaders like you and I who thrust and thrive to success and end up without the family that they love, the children that they birth, the places that when they go out of town and they say, tell me about your family, they grab a wallet and show all these great pictures, but they spend zero time with them. And so as I've began to think about balance and think about community and think about leadership, the thing that I want to offer today is really just some examples of things I've seen, some examples of things I think work, some examples of self-evaluation of how we might look at ourselves and say, is that me? Or could I be better at this, or am I okay with this? This may not minister to anybody. It may just be for me to talk to myself when I'll watch this video and look at it myself. But a couple of things have happened over the last few years that really kind of sparked this whole thought. You know, you look at research and you look at the Inc. magazines and Fortune 500 magazines. And you see people and you think, wow, that guy's really doing it. I mean, he's went from 0 to 20 billion in 10 years. How do you do that? And so you want to grab every piece of information he's ever written, every story he's ever told, and try to see if there's a niche market in there that you can grab a hold of and apply it to your business. And so when I began to look at different scenarios like that, some would be, you know, I'd dig in and I'd say, wow, I don't like what I found at the end of that story. You know, others you'd look at and you say, wow, that's actually good. I like what that woman did, or I like what that man did. And there was a gentleman about 6 months ago that I met in Dallas. And he ran about a $96 billion fund, and he was very, very successful. And he was about to go into the second or third half of his life. He'd sold so many companies and just made so much money. It was just a natural thing for him to do, just like waking up and smelling air. It's just like another million, another million, another million. And what he said to me over lunch, we became friendly and we went to lunch, and he said, Louis, you know, I've got a 16-year-old daughter that, you know, in 18 months she's going to be off to college, and I realize I don't know her. And I thought, how tragic is that? And how often do we see that? And so as we continued to talk, he said, I've got 18 months. And he applied his philosophy using the same business practices to capture her heart within 18 months. He said, okay, I'm going to back up from the day of her graduation and back up to today's date and apply what I can do along the way to regain her love and trust in her heart. And I thought, okay, in business that works. In life that sucks. Because this child has a successful father that doesn't know her name, that doesn't know her heart, that doesn't know her desires. And so, is he successful? In my opinion, he's not. Can he be successful? In my opinion, he can't. But he's doing the right things to fix, to correct that problem. There was another gentleman that I was privileged to meet about a year or two ago, who's become a mentor of mine. And so, every time I've met people over my life, I've always been drawn to older people. I've always been drawn to wisdom. I've always asked the hard questions to grandmothers and great-grandmothers and people that I would see gray hair. I was just, that guy knows something, and whether it's good or bad, I'm going to learn something from him. And so I was always drawn to those type of people. Well, this gentleman, a few years ago, I was privileged to meet him, and he has the largest African-American owned company in the country. That's a technology company. And he was here speaking at a school very much like you're going to learn about today, Bridges Academy. It was New Hope Academy, which is in Franklin, a great school. And he was here to speak, and his name is Dave Stewart, and some of you may know him. Dave Stewart is a strong man of faith. He had worked for FedEx and really had kind of made his way up the food chain and was making about $60,000, $65,000, $75,000, not a lot of money at that time. But Dave Stewart took a strong stance and said, you know what, I'm out of here. Now's my turn to do what I believe I'm supposed to do, and that was technology. Long story short, 10 years later, he goes from 0 to about $10 billion in sales. The largest technology company in the U.S., African-American owned. Well, David was here to share with these kids, inner city kids in Franklin and suburban kids in Franklin. And on our way back to take him back to his plane, I had one question for Dave. And it wasn't about how do you build your company. It wasn't about how do you facilitate all 16 locations that you have. It wasn't about how did you get successful so quick. But it was really about how do you maintain balance with all of what you have. And so my wife and I were taking him back to his plane, and I asked him that question. He was in the back seat along with his 26-year-old son, Dave Jr. And I said, Mr. Stewart, I said, how do you maintain balance with all of what you have? And he said, Louis, he said, Dave Jr., answer that question. And so he said, Dave Jr., how many things have I missed in your life? And Dave Jr. said, 0. And I thought, wow, I've never heard anything like that before in my life. He said, Louis, he said, I built my business around my children. And so to me, that spoke volumes, because all literature and all this stuff that we read tells us that you've got to hit it, and at the end of the day, if anybody's left around, then you'll share it with them. But for the most part, that's the mentality of a CEO. I stand today simply to give you permission to find that balance. I believe at the end of the day, if we were to take our last breath and someone would say to you, sir, what would you like to say? Are you going to say, I want to make sure that PO gets done? Or are you going to say, I want to let my daughter know I love her? I want my wife to know I love her. I want the world to know that I've tried to serve them well. And so I would stand here and argue that many of us have jumped on this treadmill of success without balance because we've seen success without balance. And I believe balance is crucial and critical for leadership. I believe just through my own life experiences, I've said, Louis, you've seen what you like and you've seen what you dislike. Now it's your job to do something about it. So I apply the things that I'm sharing with you today, and these are just life stories. I apply what I'm talking about to my own life. For example, I've got a 9-year-old son. I think he's the greatest kid in the world, along with my little 5-year-old daughter. And his name is Caleb. And Caleb is a bright kid. And I made a commitment a couple years ago. I said, you know, it just aggravates me when I see someone driving down the street on the cell phone with 2 kids in the back seat. It just drives me crazy, and I don't know why it drives me crazy, but it does. And so I said, I'm not going to be that person, because those kids need my attention. If it's nothing but to hear about something that they did at school today, some little kid story or something that they've learned, but it's a time to really get to know who they are and to help shape the character and the moral values of who they are. So I decided, okay, here's my deal. When I take you to school, my phone's off. When I pick you up from school, my phone's off. So along the way, over that process the last few years, I've learned so many things about my children that even at home I don't learn about my children. And so Caleb came to me back in December, and I shared the story with a few guys over the break. But Caleb came to me a couple, actually it's been 2 years now, one December night. And this is after watching Daddy kind of serve in the community. We had just done a big, we were preparing for the Louis Palau City Fest, which some of you may have seen last May 19th and 20th. We had about 100,000 people that showed up downtown Nashville, about 40 major corporations. Myself and Stuart McWhorter were co-chairs along with Darrell Waltrip. And we saw about 500 churches come together. We saw the governor, the mayor, business and civic leaders come together. And we saw our city come together. And so in that process, Caleb was always privy to the meetings. Daddy, where are you going? Well, I'm going to another meeting, Caleb. Well, why are you doing this, Daddy? I said, well, because it's important. Well, how much are they paying you, Daddy? Now, this is a 9-year-old. At that time, it was 7. How much are they paying? They're not paying me anything. It's my responsibility to give back. So fast forward, December, Caleb comes downstairs. It's 10:30 at night. This is on a school night. This is the coldest night of the year. And Caleb is normally in bed by 8 o'clock. I had just gotten back to town. I had a toothache and I had a migraine. And so you understand the pain is boom, 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 boom. And Caleb comes down and he says, Dad, and he has this frightening look on his face. He said, Dad, God just spoke to me. And so my wife is standing in the bathroom, and she said, boy, if you don't go to bed. And I said, you know, just like we most often would do. And I said, hold on, honey, hold on, honey. I said, Caleb, what did he say? And he said, Daddy, he said, he told me to go downtown and feed the homeless. And so I kind of sat back and I said, okay, Caleb. And he got real close to me. He said, Dad, he said immediately. And then his tears started coming down his eyes. And he said, Dad, feel my heart. And so I put my hand on his chest, and it just did like this. And I said, okay, this is something to this. So I said, Caleb, okay, you're going to learn a life lesson tonight. I said, and if God speaks to you, you move. I said, so I said, what are we going to feed them, Caleb? And he said, well, I got all my school stuff. I can take my potato chips and my water bottles and all this stuff, and we can go downtown and we can do this. Now, you got to understand, I'm processing, listening to Caleb, and listening to my wife simultaneously. Go to bed, Caleb. Louis, he's working you. Go to bed, go to bed, go to bed. And I'm thinking, honey, this is a teachable moment. So, you know, trying to ignore that voice that I love so much and trying to listen to this voice that I love so much. So I'm torn between that balance. And so Caleb continues to tell the story. And I said, okay, Caleb. So Caleb grabs the chips, he grabs the water bottles. And he said, Dad, you know, he said, he told me there's going to be 5 of them, and they're going to be asleep. And we can put the water and we can put the chips by them, and when they wake up, they can eat. I said, okay. I said, okay, Caleb, Dad's going to get dressed. You go get dressed, I'm going to get dressed. So I get up. Now it's 11:30. This toothache has not gone away, and this headache has not gone away. So we drive out the back of the neighborhood. I look in the mirror, and Caleb is sound asleep. So now I'm feeling like a total idiot, but I can't turn around. So we drive all the way from Franklin, all the way into downtown Nashville, and right at the split of Broadway, look over to my left, and there's three homeless people. And so I U-turn, and I get over, and we give them some food and stuff, and they're excited, and they thank you, and thank you, Jesus, and we move on. And but then I remember Caleb said it was going to be 5 of them. They were going to be asleep. So I drive on down into downtown, and I get on 2nd Avenue, I get on 1st Avenue, I go on 3rd Avenue, on 4th Avenue. There's not a soul on the streets. And I come around the corner of the Renaissance. And right there on that corner, if many of you have spent any time at the Renaissance, you know the little favorite parking spot. Well, that parking spot, directly across the street, there was 5 men sound asleep on the sidewalk, on top of that radiator. And I said, oh, my Lord, there they are. So we pull over, and I said, Caleb, there they are. He said, so we get out of the car, we put the chips in the water by each one of them. And one guy, he's an African-American guy, he jumps up, we startle him. And he says, I've been waiting on you all night long. And so I said, may we pray with you? So we prayed with him. We got back in the car. Caleb says, I told you, Daddy. Went right back to sleep. So I say all this to say it was a powerful moment for me. But it was also a moment that I believe only happened because I allowed myself the time and the balance to spend that time with him to see what's important about a leader. Being a leader is more than just making money. Being a leader is more than just having your name on every board that you're affiliated with. Being a leader is about giving and serving, as he said, Clayton referenced. Clayton McCord is a dear friend of mine, and I sign up to all of that because I believe giving back, living to give, is the most powerful thing we can do. And so when I look at this landscape of balance, and when I look at the landscape of opportunities that we have as CEOs, I think, wow, how do you influence the influencers? You know, how do you speak into the life of that mother who's driven to make it all happen because they said that she couldn't? But how do you give her that balance so that she doesn't lose those beautiful young girls or young boys that are a part of her life that she really has a heart for? And so all of that to say is that there are practical applications that we can do on a daily basis that as leaders, we don't have to wait until they began to write about our eulogy and say, you know, he served on 20,000 boards and he did this and he did that, and oh, by the way, he forgot to love the people that he cared the most about. That should not be our testimony as leaders, and that shouldn't be your testimony as a leader. And so when I think about some of our greatest leaders, I was privileged, my wife and I were with a couple a few weeks ago in Florida, and the gentleman shared a story. He'd been a longtime supporter and affiliate with Billy Graham. And this is when it really hit home for me. And he said, you know, our life has really been interesting. He said, you know, we have spent more time, the way he coined it was, he said, we've spent more time counseling in the castles. And what he meant by that was that literally people would take them on vacations with them, this couple, to basically, you know, keep the families from killing each other. And he said, we spent our entire vacations counseling the husband, counseling the wife, counseling the children. And he went on to share about a story with Billy Graham and how Billy Graham, one of our greatest leaders, and we all have a huge level of respect for him, and how when you ask him the question, is there anything you could have done differently? His answer is, spent more time with my family. And I think that's all of our answers. And he went on to share the story about sitting at an event that they were about to introduce Billy's children. Billy was going to introduce his children, and one of his daughters was sitting directly next to him. And she said, watch, when he gets ready to introduce me, he's not going to know my name. This is his daughter. And so as Mr. Graham began to introduce each one of his children, he got to her and he forgot her name. How tragic. And this doesn't just apply to men, this applies to women as well. Because we live in a society today that, you know, it's important for us to make the race and to make a mark on life. But I would again argue that it's not so important to make that mark in absence of the people that you love and the things that you love the most. And so my message and my words of encouragement today is take that permission. Remember when you were in grade school and you can get a permission slip to be in the hallway? And some of you may not got permission slips, they may have just thrown you in the hallway. But when I was in grade school, they would give you a permission slip to be able to walk around in the hallway. You had an excuse to be floating around. I would encourage us today to take that permission slip, permission to find balance, and use it anytime and any way that you choose. This is not a moment to beat anyone down. This is really just a moment to bring a focus to what I see as an ongoing issue with significant, successful CEOs. I was reading recently with Forbes magazine's Richest 400 People. And one of the things that jumped out to me immediately was on the second or third page, I think it was, they were talking about all the things they had in common. And one of the things that was in block about this large was the fact that out of the 400, 113 or so were already on their third or fourth marriage. And what does that say? What does that say to us? That something's out of balance. And I think just like a vegetable chart, we look to a vegetable chart every day and it tells us we need nutrients, we need this, we need that, we need this. And I think life balance is the same way. It's either you have it in balance or it doesn't operate. It can operate just like a car. A car can be out of line and it can shake all the way downtown. But if you get that alignment, it will go the same direction, but it will go a lot smoother. And I just believe that in these little applications of searching ourselves, applying that very intentional moments with our family, with our spouses, with the people that we love, whether it's an elderly parent or whomever, but to put them on your agenda, just like you would put your #1 supplier on your agenda. You know, you would not cancel a $1 million contract and say, oh, you know what, I'm not going to show up for that one. You would be there on time, you'd be there early, you'd be there prepared, and you'd be there attentive. And I think that's the same type of opportunities we have to share with our families and our loved ones. I wanted to open it up for some Q&A. I know that this probably just hits you right on the top of the head. You're like, what is this young man talking about? But I'd like to invite Jim back up and just...
Let's give him a round of applause before we start that. You know, it strikes me that what Louis is talking about applies to individuals who are trying to be parents and executives all at the same time, but it also applies to institutions. Art, you've watched the Bank of Nashville. It strikes me that they have tried hard to find balance between people and profits. Tell me about that. Is that accurate? And how do you do what you do in terms of an institution in terms of trying to find that balance?
Well, it is an interesting challenge because a business, their first objective is to take care of the shareholders. And so you have to have that bottom line impact. But in community, just like Louis was talking about, we all owe back to the community. So I think the bank or other companies have that same obligation. So you have to have bottom line, but you also have to reinvest back into the community. But you've got to do it methodically and make sure it balances all the way.
Now, going from a big institution to a second grader, Caroline is a specialist that works with children in schools, and particularly the worried child. But even a child who's worried or not needs to find the balance, and probably what makes them worried is not finding balance. Tell me about that.
Well, I've been in the school system for many, many years, and I'm finding that our little kids are really suffering and worrying because their families are so involved in their jobs or in whatever they're involved in that these children are being left on the side. And they are... So
you're seeing the results of the lack of balance.
Yeah, from a lot of lack of balance, and it's getting worse every year. And they're turning now, I believe, to a lot of the computer age and the television and learning their social skills from that, because they don't have the dad who sits in the car and turns off his telephone, or they don't have that option, or parents are working 2 or 3 jobs. So our little guys are really suffering a great deal these days. I'm very concerned.
Susan, your Californians are better at finding balance than we Southerners.
They just trade me.
That's right. But you've gone from nurse to executive, from an executive MBA program to seeing profits and people and patients. All. Tell me your thoughts about Louis's thoughts.
I applaud what you're saying, and I certainly echo your sentiments. We live in a society that has significant stressors, and we hear about it every single day, how we're supposed to take better care of ourselves. So it's, we look to our leaders to take good care of themselves, to give permission to come late, to leave at lunchtime and go to work, go work out, to actually take care of yourself. And in so doing, take care of those that love you and that you work with. So.
I want to respond. No, you go ahead. I wanted to respond just quickly to what Art said. The first word you said is you said we have to provide for our stakeholders. There's a value proposition there, and I think that very much like the family, if you value that family, then you'll make those same provisions. And I think that that's where many times, if you ask anybody privately, what's the most important thing, they'll say, my family. My family, my business, my community. But the reality is we put more value on our business, our community, and then our family. And that's kind of where the alignment needs to happen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love your conversation, and I grew up 30 years in corporate America, so large $10 to $50 billion companies, and have tried so hard to help the women, because as they come up in their 20s and 30s, they're working very hard to get to manager levels, and so they don't want to have children, because they're afraid they'll miss that opportunity. Well, then guess what happens? They get to be 40, and it's too late in some cases, and so I try to encourage them, go ahead and have the children, go ahead and you'll be successful in your career. And so as CEOs, it's real important that we support them in that desire to have children, because these are top performers you don't want to lose. And then when they call and want work-life balance because there's a very significant event that they need to go to or want to go to, then it's real important to focus on that, the performance and the task that they want to accomplish, and not just the hours. So there's a lot of things we can do.
Don, you've built the 5th largest pizza company in the country and have had children that have taken over the company. Tell me about your thoughts on balance.
Well, I found, first of all, I built one large company, totally self-centered, totally selfish, wanted to be a millionaire. I planted all these wrong seeds, I lost the company. Then I ended up, and I found out that there's 2 principles that make all the difference in the world. One, I learned that if we have total faith in God's love for our needs, I don't have to worry anymore about what's going to happen to me. And it seems like I moved from just what's limited coming into my 5 senses. All of a sudden I begin to get some spiritual wisdom that I wouldn't normally have. And as I begin to try to be a blessing to other people, this wisdom just begins to attract people and new products and new ideas, and all of a sudden people walk up and say, "Good Lord, how'd you build that?" You say, "I didn't do it." In fact, it's just beyond belief. So we've built this company now on those 2 principles. We're going to have total faith in God's love for our needs, and we're going to forget us. And if we can go out and meet the needs of other people, then you're going to be successful.
So you're saying that's better for business and for personal.
There's only one way.
There's only one way.
There's only one way to live, and if you live that way, you're going to be successful, really rounded. Now, I don't do that all the time. I fall apart sometimes.
And just to affirm what you just said, we were in Memphis a couple weeks ago with Kemmis Wilson, who his father's founder of Holiday Inn, and we were having some time of sharing, and Kenneth said, which I thought was very intriguing and interesting, he said, I created a life plan for my son. And with those very principles, it was about spirituality, it was about business, it was about serving, and serving others well. And so he said it was a 15-year plan that we were very intentional about how and what he got involved with. And so at the end of his discussion, I said, well, is it working? And he started tearing up. He said, yes, it is. He said, and I thank God that it is. So that's very true, and I share those same principles.
Landon, I'd be interested to know what you think and what you think your boss thinks. Landon came from working at the White House to working for Clayton McWhorter here. And what would you think Clayton would think about these thoughts, and what do you think as a younger version of Clayton?
Well, I think first off, Clayton would applaud his efforts. I know that Clayton and Louis are good friends, and I know that Clayton's son Stuart and Louis do a lot together as well. So, from my perspective, I absolutely applaud it. I'm probably younger than most of you, but even from my perspective as a young person growing up and kind of moving up in the business career, it's something that we all need to hear. So I applaud what you're doing.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Louis, when you made several really good analogies, one about the car that shimmies on the way to work as opposed to driving straight. And since all this is probably a process that you never quite get everything exactly perfect all the time, how do you know when you're starting to lose balance?
I think it shows up in so many ways. I mean, I think it shows up in behavior. I think it shows up in resentment. When you see kids responding to you differently. I think it begins to rear its head if you're looking. But to your earlier point, if you're building it on selfishness, you don't see any of it. You're blind. You're like Stevie Wonder, But if you want to see the signs, they're clearly there. We just don't acknowledge them. And I think it's when when your kid, here's a good example. When you have run out of balance and you tell your son, I'm going to be back in a second, and he go ahead and tell you, okay, Dad, yeah, I know you're not coming back. There's a strong indicator that you probably have lied to him so much now that your truths mean nothing anymore. So he doesn't even get excited and anticipate you coming back to play basketball with him or to do any of those things that you might say. And so, little things like that. But I think that there's indicators that are very, very clear if you look. If you value the conversation or the company of a customer more than you do your spouse or more than you do making that basketball game for your son, then there's something wrong. Yes, sir.
I appreciate your conversation. Is very, very intriguing, very much needed. Balance and family. I remember over 10 years ago when I started my business, I would, like you, go to those gray-haired fellows because I wanted wisdom. And they would always tell me, gosh, I wish I was like you. I wish I could be like you. And I wish my sons would come talk to me just like you're talking to me, because I would ask them hard questions, probably pretty personal questions, but I need to ask those questions. That particular time, Louis, is interesting. At 4:15 in the morning, I would wake up. 4:15 to 5:30 in the morning is my time. 6 o'clock, I get my boys up, cook the breakfast. It's their time. I take them to school. When I come home from work or the office, it's my family time. Telephone is turned off. I am completely focused on balance and family. I didn't have a father growing up, and I'm not going to go out over the world to try to make a worthy gain in my family experience the same thing I'm doing, and I'm walking around with them. So it's very interesting, and I really appreciate that. And I tell you guys, it's 24 hours in a day. It's 12 hours in a work day. You get up at 4:30 in the morning to do what you have to do, and the rest could be for you and your family.
Very good.
Good. Frank, I'd kind of like to know what the executive director of a Montessori school thinks about all this.
Well, we really are very much about balance. And the comment you made about turning off the phone in the car it just resonated with me, because I talk to the parents often about giving their children a genuine encounter moment or a gem versus being in the car with them or being at home with them and sitting them down to do something on their own. Just 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day of eye contact and focused attention on those children and what's going on in their life, and them knowing you're really interested will give them more than they would get in a whole week of being in the same room watching television or listening to you on the telephone. So I struggle with balance, and my parents at the school are young and they struggle with balance. But this was really good for me to go back and tell them about the session I heard today, and how you got to keep working on having that balance in your life. It's so very important. When I was young, I didn't spend as much time in a balanced situation with my children because I was surviving and working and trying to make ends meet. And so I really appreciate hearing people try to encourage young people to do that.
Well, we're going to shift gears, but before we do, there's kind of a quote I read the other day that seems to be apropos for this segment, is that the greatest irony in life is that oftentimes the second most important thing in life becomes the enemy of the first. And I think that's what we've got to guard against when we're looking for balance. So we're going to shift to, Louis has been involved in Bridges Academy. Michael went over Friday and shot a short video. It's about three and a half minutes, so we'd ask your indulgence to watch this, and then we're going to talk about it just a little bit, just to kind of throw a spotlight on this new program, which is in its first year, and you will be impressed. I'll tell you up front, it is remarkable. And as we want to throw this spotlight not only in this room, but in the television audience, and it is certainly a program worthy of support.
My name is Leon Dupree. This is Bridges Academy class of 2015. I first came to Bridges Academy in August when my mom had told me about it, and I was so excited. Then that's when we had this meeting and they gave us all of our stuff. My favorite subject is math because I can add up all the numbers and like I could just do it in my head. My favorite thing about Bridges Academy is the teachers. Well, they're nice, they're supporting, and they listen to you, and they also help out at the school a lot. Bridges Academy has changed my life because like my academics is getting better, and I'm getting to know people better.
My name is Donovan Donaldson. I go to Bridges Academy, class of 2015. My first day of school was very good. I met a lot of new friends, and I didn't get in any arguments like I used to in other schools. My favorite subject is math. Math has a lot of value in it because almost everything you do is dealing with math. Like say if somebody's supposed to pay you $68 and they only give you 68 cents, you would know they made a mistake. My favorite thing about Bridges Academy is the teachers. The reason I like the teachers is because they're really strict in the work, and the other school that I went to, they weren't as strict as our teachers are here. If you mess up on a paper, if they're strict and say, Donovan, you need to put your name on here, or you'll get an F. That's being strict, so you won't mess up in life. Bridges Academy is changing my life because they are teaching us that we need to study more and not just lay around and play. That has a lot of value because if you don't study, you won't get good grades. And that means later in life, that you will not know anything. Therefore, if you don't have any education, you will have a rough life.
My name is Jordan Arnett Simpson, class of 2015. My first day at Bridges Academy was kind of weird because I felt kind of alone because I didn't know anybody. But it was a great experience for me. It was great because I learned new things, I made new friends. I've grown a lot since then, and I feel very proud of myself for what I've done. My favorite subject would be science because I'm very interested in medical science. I just want to live an exciting life and have a great family and just live happy. Bridges Academy has affected my life because it helps me to think about what's my future. They're always telling us to think about what we're going to do and what we're going to be in life. I want everyone to succeed in life. I want myself to succeed in life. I want everybody in the world to succeed. I want to help people. I want to do stuff for people. I want to sacrifice things for people and help them and give them homes and clothes.
We are the Bridges Academy Warriors class of 2015. Brotherhood, wisdom, faith.
When I think about these kids and I think about the opportunities of change for these children, it's a general community of exposure. It's a general community of help, and it's a general community that will allow change. And so education, for me and for the boys at Bridges, is a catalyst to do that. And with a leader like Derek and with the support and vision of John and the collective board and collective community, there are millions of little Lewises and little Dereks and little Joes and little all of you that are in the hearts of these kids. All they need is direction and opportunity. And so I believe passionately about the school and about the potential of any of these kids. And so that's why.
Okay, Derek, here's your challenge. We promised these folks they'd be out by 9, which is about 6 minutes away. Bank of Nashville's got a check for you, but if you talk too long, we won't have time for the check.
Well, he's going to stop talking real quick.
Thank you for having me. Here's the bottom line. Nashville is a great community. Middle Tennessee is a great part of the country. The reality is, right now, only 4 out of 10 inner city boys graduate from high school. 4 out of 10. What does that do to our taxes? What does that do to our safety? What does that do to the sanctity of our community? Destroys it. Bridges Academy is simply put a solution where we're providing a very holistic approach with not just hardcore academics, not just a challenging environment, but there's after-school training, 3 meals a day, bus transportation for our neediest kids, mentoring for kids. Basically, we're front-loading our program with all the things these kids are missing. 2 of the boys you saw in that video, their fathers are incarcerated. 2 of the 3. So what we're doing is more than just a school. It's really about trying to shape these young men's character, give them role models, and give them challenge in a way that they just would not get otherwise. And it is folks like John and Louis and Bill and Ron and others who make the difference. Because you all sit in a place that if we can get more kids like this to the place you're in, our community will be phenomenal. So we appreciate it. As you all walk out today, we've got a brochure out on the table. This brochure was donated to us by Bohan Advertising. It tells our story, gives our website and that, so I hope you pick one of those up. And I just want to share one thing that Louis said on his talk, and it goes back to what you said. I've been working with kids for 30 years, so I've been that person that your kids have been talking to. There's 2 suggestions I would make. Set regularly scheduled activities with your kids. That is so much more valuable than hitting and missing. Regularly scheduled activities with your kids make a deeper impression than they last long. Secondly, work with your kids in the community. As your kids see you working to benefit and help others, that will do more than anything in helping to shape their memory as to the kind of person you were, the kind of parent you were, and the kind of person you want them to be when they grow up. So we appreciate Michael and all the work he did, and Jim. Appreciate y'all. Thanks a lot.
I want to thank Louis for his time today and especially recognize Bridges Academy. You'll notice that the Bank of Nashville made a donation today to Bridges Academy. This is one of a series of donations that our bank is making to the community every day. As our employees serve currently on 23 different boards throughout the city. Hence the name Bank of Nashville, our community, we take it seriously as Louis does.